Hello, my name is Kennedy Satterfield, and I am a student here at ASU. This presentation was created in order to explore the major political, economic, and social events that led to the women's liberation movement. Information provided within this presentation came from the book When Everything Changed: The Amazing Journey of American Women from 1960 to the Present, written by Gail Collins. For the first time in history, it was predicted that women voters would outnumber men during the 1960 elections. Although they were celebrating the 40th anniversary of women having gained the right to vote, the majority of women still did not approve of the idea of having a female president, and women candidates weren't taken very seriously. Most of the time, women's involvement in politics stemmed from their husband's work when they would become his successor after he had passed away. Even women whose involvement didn't have ties to their husband's career were typically widows, which made voters wary due to their expected family obligations. The elections only resulted in 2 women taking seats in the Senate and 17 in the House, which unfortunately was the largest number of women involved for the next decade. Despite having the right to vote, women were still largely excluded from the political realm. During the Kennedy campaign for the New Frontier, female volunteers were often overlooked when it came to decision-making, and women as a whole were left out of Kennedy's new vision. Each year, members of the National Women's Party would introduce an equal pay amendment called ERA, but each year the amendment had been shut down. Some were becoming restless over the neglect that women were experiencing in politics, specifically over the equal pay amendment. In order to tackle this issue, Esther Peterson, appointed by Kennedy to head the Women's Bureau, created the Presidential Committee on the Status of Women, which was headed by Eleanor Roosevelt. The work done by the committee was forgotten following the president's assassination, but it was still successful in bringing together a group of like-minded and educated women to discuss their unequal status and ultimately how fed up they were. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act began to make its way through Congress. The representative for Virginia and chairman of the Rules Committee, Howard Smith, attempted to stop the act by proposing an amendment which would include women to be protected from job discrimination. Knowing that at the time the idea of women having equal pay struck most as ridiculous, he assumed that the addition of women would quickly shut the bill down. Smith's plan backfired following inspiration from Martha Griffiths, who stood and proposed that, if such a bill were going to pass, it was going to carry a prohibition against discrimination on the basis of sex, and that both black and white women were going to take a modest step forward together. The amendment passed in both the House and Senate, but the actual law as it pertained to women was only loosely enforced. Even so, this occurrence marked the first time in history where black and white women were more openly working together. Despite having been fighting for the same causes in the past, their activism had been largely segregated. Now, African American women were helping to lead the way, and united they would prove to be much stronger in the future. Whenever there has been a shortage of labor in the past, employers have typically filled the available positions with women. During World War II, women overtook the American workforce, and many experienced great discontent when they were expected to simply return to their old roles in society after the war had ended. How women were regarded in the workforce during the mid to late 1960s in part changed due to the shifting economy, which emphasized less need for laborers and more need for customer service representatives, and women's skills were finally being placed at a higher value. The economy was expanding so rapidly at the time that the regular available work pool just wasn't enough. In 1966, President Johnson began to urge employers to consider women to fill position openings, and during the 1960s, 2/3 of new jobs went to women. The discrimination that married women faced when joining the workforce was beginning to dwindle, and the popularity of a 2-income family was on the rise. This was vital to the overall success of women and helped change the way that they were viewed in society. Women were finally able to prove not only to themselves, but also to America at large, that they were capable of much more, and that it was possible to juggle both a career and manage a household. During the late 1960s, college campuses were very hyper-political, and this in part started due to the sexual revolution. Despite the social acceptance of women drinking, smoking, and socializing in a manner similar to men, society still chastised them for having premarital sex, while it was encouraged for males. The sexual revolution's aim was to address this double standard. The revolution was largely made possible due to women having greater access to birth control. Although access remained very restricted in numerous states, eventually the pill was even being prescribed on college campuses. In 1968, Jeannette Rankin led a demonstration to protest the Vietnam War. It ended up being one of the largest gatherings of women since the demonstrations for women's suffrage, and incorporated both the old and the fresh new activists. The younger activists were more radical. They did not want laws overturned or to overthrow the existing system. Instead, they wanted women to finally be included in all aspects of society. They wanted to see equality everywhere, from sports to art to business and, of course, politics. The 1968 Vietnam protest manifested into a movement that was open to any and every woman ready to join them, and would eventually be known as the Women's Liberation Movement.